In early 1976, I must say that if we look back now, it seems fairly obvious that quite a lot of the likeable, cheeky chappies seem to have moved to Los Angeles, and the pub rock bands were all playing in stadiums, and a great deal of success seemed to be equated with dry ice and so on. I wonder, is that because we're looking back now? When you think of early 76, did you feel it was a little bit dispiriting at that time?
Well, probably not. I think it's the old banging your head against the wall principle. You know, you don't realise how whatever it is until you stop doing it. I forget the exact expression, but you know what I mean anyway. And I think I was probably relatively satisfied with the first part of 1976 until we got into the second part of it. But the problem was, of course, that the only records that you had to look forward to were records where you say, well, there's going to be a new Led Zeppelin LP in March, that kind of stuff, and then there'll be a Roxy Music LP sometime in the autumn, and then that was about it. So there was very little unexpected.
Yeah, it did seem, looking back at the old scripts, as I, of course, was here, you know, a lot of it was treading water. You know, Phil Collins popped up with Brand X doing his bit of jazz. Elkie Brooks was on, and all sorts of rather unlikely people today. But it seemed as if nothing was going anywhere.
Well, I think the thing is, too, that most of the bands, if we had any new bands in for sessions or we've played any records by new bands, there were bands that contained at least one member of a previously successful group, because they were the only people who were likely to get recording contracts, because you have to remember that then there were no independent record labels worthy of the name, and people like Ireland and Virgin were seen as being pretty radical and out on a limb.
Yeah. In that case, what was the first hint that something different was at last coming over the horizon, as far as your ears were concerned?
Well, having mentioned Island Records, it was one of their acts, I think. It was Eddie and the Hot Rods, I think, were the first people to give me an indication that there was change in the air. And that's because they were doing that kind of, is it Canvey Island or something like that? I don't know, always the romance about Essex, which has never seemed to me to be a romantic place at all. But that kind of Essex R&B thing, just very, very fast. And I went to see them play in London at the Speakeasy, actually, of all places, and thoroughly enjoyed them, and came back and told you about it. And you, as I remember, weren't entirely convinced by Eddie and the Hot Rods, but they did seem to indicate that there was something afoot.
Early Eddie and the Hot Rods there, and actually you're quite right, I remember going to see them, because they were one of those names around, and standing with Muff Winwood, who was sort of looking at them for a record company, you know, having to think about whether to sign them, I think. And both of us had played in bands in the 60s, but our attitude was, we've done all this before, they're just doing all the old stuff. You know, it seemed to be just a lot of energy and banging, but was that what excited you, that it was the lack of sophistication that you thought, oh, thank goodness we're getting back to roots again?
I suppose it must have been that initially, because I was genuinely very excited about them. I mean, couldn't wait to get back and tell you about them, as far as I recall. And then, of course, that was followed shortly afterwards. There were people like Graham Parker and The Rumour, and although they don't sound all that radical now, at the same time there was something going on, you know, you felt there was something happening there too that indicated that change was going to come, to quote Sam Cooke, or misquote Sam Cooke, actually. Wish I hadn't bothered with that, really. And then, of course, it was the next thing that happened of importance was, well, every week, or sometimes a couple of times a week, I used to go down to Virgin Records at Marble Arch, and the chap who was manager of the place at the time used to, I'm sure without approval of head office, allow me to take records out on approval. And the ones I didn't want, I would return, and obviously the ones I wanted and played on the radio, I would have to pay for. And I took out about 10 or 12 records, one of which was the first LP by the Ramones. Now, I liked several things about it. One, I liked the simplicity of the name, really, and the fact that it had an implication of kind of that Spanish New York thing, which seemed quite romantic, and also because it was a monochrome sleeve as well. So I took all of these things back and I put the record on, and initially, because of the kind of aggression and the brevity of the numbers, I was slightly taken aback by it, but sufficiently excited, I always think anyway, that in that particular programme I put something like 5 or 6 tracks into that night's programme, rewrote the running order and everything.
And did the audience like them?
Not a great deal. The initial reaction was one of, not hostility exactly, but people, rather as they had done when we'd first played reggae, you know, almost a decade previously, and people had written in and said, you know, come on, old fella, pull yourself together, as they do now with hip-hop, you know, rather regretfully more than anything else. Come on, get this nonsense out of your system, old boy, and get back to whatever it was, you know.
Yeah. It's just a phase, like your parents used to say.
That's right, you'll grow out of it in no time at all. And that sort of reaction has always excited me anyway, because whenever people start writing in large numbers to complain, you always feel that there must be a good reason for it. And I tend to have exactly the opposite reaction to that my letter writers, my correspondents, expect me to have. And so I then started... well, we did, didn't we? I seem to remember that we did a special kind of punk programme, but...
Oh, wait a minute, you're going ahead of things a little bit now. Let's first, because some of our younger listeners won't actually have heard the Ramones in all possibility, so let's hear something from that first Ramones album. The Ramones are not sounding quite as shocking as they perhaps did 10 years ago, but I wonder if some things you said just now is a bit of a clue to your ears and your listening, because what you said rather attracted you to the Ramones was really kind of a minimalist approach, getting it down to the basics, sort of one easy name, I'm not quite sure about that, even the cover, just black and white, short numbers, no nonsense. I wonder if we've perhaps getting on to what you're about, which we've perhaps not come through as obviously in the first 3 programmes that we've done. is it really about just the very basic, simple things in rock and roll that you're about? You really, the more sophisticated things become, the less you like it.
That is
right?
true. Yes, to a certain degree, that is true. I mean, I was even things like the Pink Floyd's more complex numbers were still at the same time actually rather simple. You know, they're just very basic. The same tune just played over and over and over again over the whole side of an LP, in essence. So simplicity was the rule there as well. And I do seem to remember, I mean, there may be historical evidence of this, but I do seem to remember myself saying in the mid-70s, prior to punk, that I would like to see some sort of return to the discipline that was imposed by the 2.25 minute long single thing, where you've got to, like Jerry Lee Lewis was the example that I think I seem to remember using at the time, was that when you went into a studio, you'd got 2 minutes and 15 seconds, 2:30 at the outside, in which to say everything that you'd got to say, possibly in your life, if the record didn't sell well enough. And that seemed to me to concentrate the mind wonderfully and to produce quite extraordinarily passionate records.
There weren't any British punk records available at the start in the period you've been talking about when it was first getting the publicity. There just weren't any records. Do you remember the first group that we had on live, though, the first punk band?
Well, that would have been the Vibrators, of course, who were very much looked down on because they were seen as they may well have been, I don't know, but they were seen as opportunists by the true punks. But they did get the first record out that could identifiably be described as a punk record.
Vibrate by the Vibrators. Well, that was October 76 when we took that first step. But then the Damned did come in November and did more of a sort of straight punk session, and were jolly friendly, pleasant boys when they came in. I was a bit apprehensive, but the session they did for us then, which is available as a Peel session, let's mention that, one of our radio sessions that's commercially available, was short, sharp numbers, very short and sharp. And yet they afterwards went almost to be like a psychedelic band. I mean, they changed completely. But, I mean, did you feel that those very early sessions were perhaps nearer to what punk was about?
Well, I like the fact that some of the bands, after they'd recorded the sessions, and of course it's easy for me to say this because quite clearly I'm not involved, and as it were, my career isn't anything to do with this. But, I mean, what happened was that bands would come along, record a session, and then break up, feeling that having recorded a Peel session was as far as they wanted to go. Or sometimes they'd just make a record, and once the record had been played on the radio, again they would break up, feeling that that was enough. And I quite liked the idea of that, because for something like 6 or 7 years prior to the advent of punk, we had rather suffered from the fact that we were caught up with a number of bands who quite clearly saw what they were doing as being part of a lifelong career structure that was going to take them into old age, still churning out the hits in big stadiums and so forth, and in America and Japan.
Still are.
And some of the brutes are out there at this very moment doing it, I'm appalled to say. But so the punk attitude seemed to be entirely appropriate, where being in a band and making records was only a part of an entire lifestyle rather than being just an end in itself. It was something which people wanted to do, but having done, would then discard. And I liked that idea.
Well, let's listen to one of those items, neat, I think, from the Damned's first session. One of that first tentative step that we were making into sort of punk history. Neat, neat, neat from The Damned, a radio session for the John Peel programme, now available on vinyl. But the first real important punk record, I think, on vinyl came a month after that. That will be December 1976, the famous Anarchy in the UK. The Sex Pistols finally brought something out. Did you think, we did play it, certainly, we were about the only people who did, but did you think at the time, I've got to play this is a symbol of what the kids are now doing? I don't actually like it. I mean, did you like the record?
Difficult to remember, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm pretty sure that I did. Although I seem to remember a slight disappointment with it, in that it seemed vaguely reminiscent of that kind of New York Dolls area, you know, and it wasn't, in a sense, it was a bit too long for a start. If you remember, I don't know exactly how long it is, but it was longer than I'd imagined it was going to be, and was slightly disappointed, but nevertheless knew that it was a record that was considerably better than any of the other things that were being offered to play at the time.
Traffic line, your future dream is a shopping scheme, 'cause I wanna be anarchy in the city.
Anarchy in the UK, of course, but during that period, I noticed you were still playing things like, well, the Eagles of all people, ZZ Top, Bob Seger, a lot of the old folk musicians and so on. But eventually, the little independent companies and the major companies all started to bring out sort of punk material, and gradually the punk thing started to dominate the show. Was this a deliberate move on your part?
It wasn't a period that I particularly enjoyed, in a way, as far as the radio went anyway, because the programme became given over almost entirely to punk records and sort of punk-related stuff, with reggae included as well, but actually nothing else. And I think, in retrospect, that was probably a mistake, because the programmes that we do now are much more broad. You know, they cover a much wider range of stuff, and I think that's really the way it should be. But what happened, I suppose, to be perfectly honest, was that the programme became, as it has done from time to time over the years, but it became fleetingly fashionable. And it became almost obligatory, for example, to put on the back of your single, thanks to John Peel and John Walters. And this didn't guarantee plays, because it usually came in the wake of a session or something like that. But so in a way, I understood in a small way what it must be like to be in a very, very successful group, and the extent to which the requirements of your audience rather take over from what it is that you actually would rather be doing. I mean, to the point where you perhaps don't even realise it yourself until later, as I didn't. But it was so exciting to be a vaguely fashionable figure at my advanced age and in a state of disrepair that I was in, that I think I probably went along with it a bit too enthusiastically, and thereby missed out on a lot of other stuff which perhaps I should have been playing, and which I might even have been listening to at home.
Well, those who were still listening and staying clinging onto your ears, as you might say, as you rushed onwards during 1977, must have realised that your hearing buds were changed at that time, because I've just looked through at some of the groups that we were having. I noticed live sessions at the start of 77. Stranglers did their first session. In May, the Jam did their first session. I think Caravan probably did their last round about the same week, actually. So for anybody who was capable of change, they needed to be available to change there. And then Generation X, they seem to be around a lot. Let's just listen to something, an early example of the work of Generation X. Generation X, as heard on the John Peel programme in 1977. Featuring, of course, Billy Idol, who's the finest example, surely, of somebody who's totally sold the whole thing out, in a sense, philosophically, and given up being a punk entirely and become a star in America.
Of course, in America, see, I think he's probably still perceived as a bit of a rebel, you know, because they like their rebels to be in their early 30s and so on, you know, and of a mould, and he certainly seems to be. Well, good luck to him. You know?
But looking back to we all know what happened since, but what was happening then, it did seem, gosh, there's a revolution taking place here in the way of music was being made, in the way pop music was being perceived and so on, and rock music. I wonder what was important to you. Was it the act of being like a do-it-yourself style music, you know, having a do-it-yourself style music so that people could say, I don't need a smoke machine and all this clever, the clever electronic devices, bang, 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 you know, just bang it out sort of thing, you know, or was it more the politics, their attitude, politics with a small p, their attitude of how you didn't need to go and live in Los Angeles, you know, and their attitude to life, the sort of simple revolutionary anarchy in the UK, kicking over the traces. What was it that appealed to you at your
I think
age
it's both
and
of those.
experience?
I think it's both of those things, really. And I suppose there was an element in it where I thought to myself, well, you know, if I was still at that age myself, I could actually have done this myself, which I would have rather enjoyed doing. But I liked the chaos of it all, really. I mean, the fact that absolutely, I mean.
Well, that rather implies the politics, in a sense.
Yes.
They're breaking the order.
Definitely. And I mean, as I've always said subsequently, you know, the most important thing that came out of it was the demystification of the whole process of making records, where people didn't have to come down to London and didn't have to sign up with some highly exploitative agency and make records by that means, and they could actually just do it themselves. So they could knock over a few phone boxes and sell the bass player's motorbike and have enough money to go into a studio somewhere and make their own single and press up 500, 750 copies of it. And I like that. More important, of course, than that was the fact that of these records, an extraordinary percentage of them were really very good indeed and very funny. That's one of the things which people overlook when they think back to punk, think of it as a rather serious kind of a socio-political movement, but there was a lot of merriment in it as well. And of the demo tapes that we were getting at the time, I mean, contrasting with it the way that it is now, where a couple of weekends ago, I sat down and listened to over 200 demo tapes, and an exceptionally melancholy task it was too, because although none of them were perfectly ghastly, there were none of them that were worth hearing again. Whereas in those days, you'd listen to 10 demo tapes, and 5 or 6 of them would be bands that you actually wanted to book, and by and large did. And there'd be a couple of them that would be wonderful, and I've got a lot of them at home still. I mean, things like the first Undertones demo tape, wonderful. I mean, you could the sound quality was monstrous, but the atmosphere of it and the energy that was generated was matchless.
Punk wasn't just one thing. People forget that. It wasn't the way it's become now when punks can line up to be photographed with Japanese tourists as if they were the yeoman warders. They know what their hair should be like. It's become a new formal approach. It's become a new tradition. But in those days, it could be almost anything. And there were so many bands that weren't just going 1, 2, 3, 4 and then banging very fast, which was the punk style as we think of it now. A lot of different things were happening. I mean, for instance, how did you feel when, well, we both went down to see them. The Slits, for instance, were a good example of something that didn't just sound like everything else.
No, well, obviously, we both of us adored the Slits, and because they could barely...
Got their autographs, actually.
Oh, have you? Very collectible. Well, of course, the Sotheby's. Well, no, actually, perhaps not Sotheby's for that just yet. None of them are dead, as far as I know. But... No, none of them quite clearly could play their instruments at all. I mean, or with any real skill. But at the same time, there was something quite clearly remarkable about them. And I think, oddly enough, the first Peel session to be issued and the first session that they recorded for the programme was like... I still think that's the best record that's come out on Strange Fruit, is that Slits session, because it just still sounds... wonderful, and to me, rather, as you say, rather more than the straight-ahead punk things, the Damned stuff and those sort of records, it does sum up the spirit of the era.
Love and Romance by the Slits from their very first John Peel session, available on record as a Peel session, of course. The interesting thing was, though, that what they heard was quite artistically shocking to us, what we heard when they played. But, in fact, they'd already been polished up when they got to that session. Our engineers gave them a lot of time and retakes, and they did a little bit separately, and they sounded, I was amazed how melodic and
how it pulled together. That's certainly true.
And then they went on to get more and more polished and disappeared.
That's right. Yes, they did. And on the first LP, although it's an LP which I can still listen to with a lot of pleasure, but it sounded like a different band. So those sessions, and at the time it was very important. I mean, those sessions really caught things just as they, from the moment they appeared above the ground, really, before the record industry got hold of them, or before the band themselves were able to afford to get into a studio and make their own record, and just to work with other producers and so on, who would, by definition, would distort what it was that they were doing.
Well, it was one of the values of radio, at least radio in the sense of the John Peel programme at the time, that it was easy for a group who we saw in a pub to just step in and do almost what it was they thought they were doing in their
purely
heads.
Simply because there wasn't the time, really, for them to try and refine it.
And here's another good example, of course, the first recording, as far as I know, by Siouxsie and the Banshees. Loving a Void from Siouxsie and the Banshees, who I think I'd seen a couple of times, and we got in. But what do you feel about Siouxsie now? Because there's a good example of someone who's not just sort of sold out and gone commercial, but has continued with a career for, 10 years.
Yes. Well, you'd never have imagined it was possible at the time, but although the stuff the Banshees do now doesn't please me as much as the first things that they did for us. At the same time, it would be wrong for me to condemn a band for surviving for 10 years, because quite clearly the Fall have done exactly that, and I exult in everything that the Fall do. I mean, I don't think I have ever failed to play a Fall record on the radio. Continuing for a long time is not of itself bad, I think, as long as what you do continues to be interesting and amusing and in a sense kind of irritating as well. You know, and I think the Banshees things have become not exactly predictable, but at the same time you've got a pretty good idea of what it's all going to sound like.
Yeah. But of course some of the punks, to move on a little bit, because did take that revolt and that spirit of revolt, and certainly make it into style, there's no question of that, and also found that it was going to be marketable. It wasn't just a temporary kicking over.
Well, I think
the
it became
traces.
marketable almost from the very start, you know, like all of these things do, and the process of corruption begins from the moment things start, you know, and that's always a distressing thing to watch, and it's something which is always difficult to do in that when you're putting programs together and so forth, and you're trying to keep abreast of the interesting and exciting and energy-filled areas of music, because you can see this process of corruption spreading very, very quickly, and it's very pervasive. And when you're aware of this yourself, it's not easy to explain it to other people, really, because you can't actually sort of say where it is and how you can't. It's not something that you can quantify in any way at all. And this has led over the years to the accusation that once things become popular, that we abandon them, as though this was like a policy decision. But it really isn't like that in a way. I mean, I wish that there were, and sometimes I go too far, I think, in wanting to cling on to things for as long as I possibly can to demonstrate that there is no truth to this accusation. But at the same time, the very process of, you know, being successful is terribly corrupting. And it's not through, I don't criticise the people who are successful for this. And I don't really criticise record companies, because I always thought it was preposterous that the Clash, for example, to sing that thing, Remote Control, or Complete Control, against CBS Records. I mean, either they were being deceitful or quite astonishingly stupid. If you sign to a large record company, quite clearly they are long-term investment organisations. You know, they're not charitable trusts or even in any particular way artistic organisations. So to pretend that you assume that when you got involved with a large record company, you were surprised to find that they were thinking in terms of a long career and so forth, it's just complete nonsense, I think, and as I say, deceitful. I think the main restrictions on bands continuing creativity, and therefore their continuing ability to be of interest to us, does come from the audience and the requirements of the audience. And as a band, as their reputation spreads outwards to Europe, say we're talking about a British band, spreads out to Europe and then out to Japan and America and beyond, even with The Cure and Siouxsie and the Banshees now, Latin America, they've opened up that area and so on. Quite clearly, those audiences expect them to make the noise that they've always made, and this must make it very, very difficult for them to actually try anything really different. And it would be arrogant, I think, of us too, at the same time, to expect them to remain in poverty and suffering because of some obscure artistic yearning of ours.
Sounds like a cue for Adamant.
Why not?
Try the foxtrot, I'll eat a mango. You drink a straight scotch. You know I told you could be classy. So why did you have to be so nasty? Remember the girls of the Deutscher girls, lover of my eye, from down on the Rhine. I'll fill your bath with the finest champagne, I'll lick your skin dry, I cherish your name. The stakes get higher as you dress parsley. So why did you have to be so nasty? Remember the girls of the Deutsche girls, lover of my eye, from down on the Rhine. I love your blonde hair, I kiss your pigtails, and I could not share the scratch of your nails. And though you mark me, you're so glassy. Oh, why did you have to be so nasty? Remember the girls of the Deutsche girls, lover of my eye, from down on the Rhine.
Very early Adamant there, and quite obviously somebody who we had on the programme very early on, but when he moved on to the pirate makeup and filling very large halls with screaming girls and all that diddly-qua-qua stuff.
I like the diddly-qua-qua. I was always very keen on that.
Well, I mean, became a number one selling artist. Did you feel any resentment? Did you think, oh, there's another chap who's cashed in on being on this programme?
Really, not at all. No, I mean, it's one of those things that people always assume you do feel. But in a way, I mean, as with somebody like Fergal Sharkey, who seems to stop making records, which is a pity. But, people seem to expect, I was asked so many times by people who were interviewing me for fanzines and things, with something approaching relish, because they expected that there'd be a great tornado of abuse. Did I regret the fact that Fergal Sharkey was having hit singles? And not at all. I was really pleased that he was. Because, I mean, he came from Derry, obviously, and a place where there's not a lot of opportunity for people to do particularly well, unfortunately, and had done extremely well, certainly financially and so on, and I was pleased to see that, and I saw it really as you might, in a way, although this sounds slightly patronising, and I've only just thought of it, so it's not something which occupies my thoughts a lot, but rather like as a headmaster of a school who sees, ex-pupils of the school going on to do quite good things and having exhibitions of their paintings in sort of reputable galleries, or, putting on, having their plays performed by a whole truck or something like that, you know what I mean? It's that sort of feeling, really. So there is that element of, as I said before, of that patron of the arts, in a way, but not in the kind of 17th, 18th century way where you had to invest your own money and time. But just that you were in a position to give people who were doing work that you
just
felt...
give them some exposure.
Give them...
That's up to them, yes. I think people do assume that you've got some spiritual stake in the group, whereas it's up to them to carry on with it. And in Adam's case, he chose to go on and make money. Good luck to him. But starting off, as we said right at the start of the show, with the Ramones first giving a hint of what might be done, other things were happening in the States, often of a far more extreme nature, weren't they, that I seem to remember we were using at that time.
Well, of course, yes. I mean, there was that whole New York, what do they call it? It was No Wave, wasn't it? And it was all people like Mars and James Chance and so on, and the Contortions and DNA. There are numerous bands called DNA, but one of them. But the people that I liked best were Teenage Jesus, which of course is Lydia Lunch, Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, because their records seem to be. No Wave seem to be pretty accurately describe it. They seem to be kind of anti-everything, confrontational records, and I've always rather enjoyed those.
Well, as the spirit of this particular programme, I suppose, and the spirit of punk has been getting back to your roots of what you want. And I mean, you said in the very first programme that you're attracted by the unhinged voice. Well, there were no voices came more unhinged than Lydia Lunch. Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. I suppose that the band that started not being punks, but in the punk period, moving on, doing something a little bit different, who are still significant today. We were talking only the other day about rebooking them yet again, 10 years on. The Fall. Why do you think there's been that extended love affair between you and the Fall? It's not as if it's been a social thing. I don't think you've only met them. But every record that comes out isn't a disappointment to you.
No, never is. They've never disappointed me yet. And I suspect won't, and this is becoming a unique experience. I mean, there have been people that I've been able to cite from the past who've gone on making records, people like Neil Young and so on, but their more recent work really hasn't been up to scratch, I don't think, or at least hasn't had what I was looking for in it. But the Fall have not yet disappointed me, and I can't think of any other artist who's managed to do that for 10 years. And as with all of the things that I like best, I simply don't know what it is that I like about the Fall. One of the things that I like about Mark Smith as a human being, and as you say, I've only met him twice. First time I was scared stiff that he was going to, rather like I was with the Damned when I first did a gig with them, that he was going to in some way attack me. But it's the fact that he never takes the prevailing trendy attitude. I mean, some of the things he says, if he means them, I would very violently disagree with. But at the same time, I'm really pleased that he actually does say what he thinks, even if he only thinks it at that particular moment. But he does come out and say it, however unfashionable it may be. So I like him at one remove for that reason. But just the fact that the Fall are always identifiably the Fall, but they do seem to evolve. And obviously the fact that there have been so many different musicians in and out of the band over the years has contributed to that. But as you said, they've never let me down yet.
Well, let's go back to the point where they began to evolve right at the start, Bingo Master's breakout.
Two swans in front of his eyes, coloured balls in front of his eyes. It's number one for his Kelly's eye. Treble six right over his eye. A big shot's voice in his ears, worlds of silence in his ears. All the numbers account for years, checks the cards through eyes of tears. Bingo Masters break out, Bingo Masters break out, a Bingo Masters break out. All he sees is a back of chairs, in the mirror a lack of hairs. A light round which he fills out, hear the players all shout. Bingo Masters break out, Bingo Masters break out, Bingo Masters break out. Glass of lager in his hand, silver microphone in his hand, wasting time in numbers and rhyme, 100 blank faces by. Bingo Masters break out, Bingo Masters break out, Bingo Masters break out. Came the time he flipped his lid, came the time he flipped his lid. Holiday is pipe fell through, players put it down to. Bingo Masters break out, Bingo Masters break out, Bingo Masters break out. A hall full of cards left unfilled, ended his life with wine and pills. There's a grave somewhere only partly filled, a sign in a graveyard on a hill reads Bingo Masters break out.
Bingo Masters breakout by The Fall, a group that is still relevant to you, of course, and to the programme. Looking back, though, round about the same time that record was made, I see in July 1978, Dire Straits had got to number 5 with their first album, Dire Straits. So you look back and think, hello, the warning signs were already there that what we thought was going to be a revolution turned out to be a passing revolt. Or I wonder if it did. I wonder how you see it now. Because Dire Straits could still, if they brought out an album now, that CD, that album would sell more than the whole of the real punk movement did put together, and many homes would love to own it and have it. So was punk a bit of a flop, really?
Well, not at all, for the very reason that I gave earlier on, the fact that it did open the door to all this genuinely innovative and, I suppose, experimental, sounds a bit pompous, but just whole areas of music which otherwise, people wouldn't even have considered, as it were, that it would have been worth... I mean, previously, prior to punk, when people formed bands, they formed them with the idea of sounding pretty much like something that was already successful, because that was the only way in which they're ever going to attract any attention at all. I mean, they might take something that already existed and make it more extreme, as somebody like Hendrix would have done, but at the same time that there was no opportunity at all for bands to actually go away and do something that simply had not been done before. And those are the records that I've always appreciated most, and what I look for in demo tapes and things. The thing when I put a record on the turntable and I can't immediately say, well, these people have been listening to Velvet Underground or The Cure or whoever it happens to be, that's what I really like more than anything else, that the element of surprise. And if it hadn't been for punk, we certainly wouldn't have had that. And the fact that I think we were right, when we didn't have Dire Straits, and we only barely had the Police, and that was after I'd seen them in concert in Holland when they'd played particularly well. I mean, and they, I think, still would argue that it was perhaps their best ever gig, and so on. I was rather carried away with that. But those bands, actually, I mean, although they may have gone on to vast success subsequently, people would say you must have been mad not to have had them on the programme at the time. We were absolutely right not to have them on the programme.
Would you say, really, I don't totally put words into your mouth, though, to sum that up and say that those sort of bands, Dire Straits, The Police, and many bands of that type, really sum up conformity? And the spirit of punk was, whatever it was non-conformity.
Yes, I mean, certainly initially, but then, of course, that kind of non-conformity, mass non-conformity, obviously is conformity. So you can't escape from that. In the same ways, if you're, if you try and be a DJ without an image, the fact that there is no image, you hope that there is no image, itself immediately becomes an image. So you can't escape from that at all. But punk, at least, as I say, it's those periods of chaos and confusion, that the record industry is occasionally thrown into, as it was really, I suppose, with the onset of Merseybeat, and the idea that record companies sent people trawling up in Liverpool for almost anybody who could hold a guitar the right way round. And it's during those periods of confusion that the really exciting things happen. But the great, as I say, the thing about punk was that although it itself, as you say, ended up with people with Mohicans being photographed with Japanese tourists, but the effects of it are still being felt, and that's something which cannot now be, can't be corralled again. That whole area of what people think of as like independent music, but it's something which never can be contained again, because it will always exist in some form, and that's wonderful.
Can we finish this programme with an example, not necessarily of pure punk, but of something that probably couldn't have happened without the spirit of punk from that era?
Well, every time I do one of my terrible gigs, whatever records I play in the course of it, which tend to be not the ones which people request, people come up and say to me, can you play something by the Sisters of Mercy? I usually say, under no circumstances whatsoever am I going to play anything by the Sisters of Mercy. But they always come up to me at some stage, but a lot of people come and say, when are you going to play Teenage Kicks? And I say to them, I shall play Teenage Kicks, as I have done for 10 years, at the end of the event. And I always sign off with some false, modest observation, and then finish with Teenage Kicks, which I still maintain is the best record ever made.
Right through the night, I'm gonna call her on the telephone.
And a very good afternoon. Johnny Walker here. Welcome along to the Stereo Sequence. With our usual reminder, Radio 1 on Stereo FM between 88 and 91 on the dial until 7:30 tonight. 4 o'clock this afternoon, the American Chart Show. 5:35, Lloyd Cole introduces tracks from the new album Mainstream. And live music at 6:30 with Squeeze in concert. I'll be back with music at 3, but now over to the two Johns, Messrs. Peel and Walters, for some more tango.
Blue Tango by Ray Martin and his concert orchestra. And for anyone who's just joined the series, that was the first record John Peel bought back in 1952. And we've been tracing the history of his listening since then. And if you have just joined the series, well, you're almost too late because, we're nearly at now. Or at least we're looking at life after punk. Now, common sense told us, even then, that sort of safety pin punks, rather like Teddy Boys, would take their place in the sort of museum of pop history. Must have realised that, but what did you expect would follow musically?
Goodness, I must admit, I don't think I really thought about it. In fact, I've never, as far as I can recall, have thought about what was going to happen next because I was too much enmeshed in what was going on
that's what
now.
It occurred to me, that's something I've never really asked you before.
Yeah.
That was a surprise question. I mean, have you always felt like, all the period we've talked about, do you ever think, like, let's say an art critic or somebody might think, this is all right, I wonder what's going to come around the corner, what are we looking out for? You always look at now then, really.
Yeah, right, because I like these things to come as a surprise, and I think that if you do try and predict what's going to happen, well, I don't think you can, frankly. I mean, when the two-tone thing came along, quite clearly, if somebody had told me at the beginning of that year that I was going to be scouring second-hand shops for old ska and blue beat records, I'd have thought they were nuts, but that was what I was doing, and I like that element of the unexpected and the surprising. I like the idea that I don't want my taste to be transformed totally. I don't want them to go through like 180 degrees and not like a religious experience, but I quite like the idea of all of your attitudes and tastes being adjusted by a few degrees, but very permanently, to the point where things that at one time you used to think were quite wonderful suddenly become substantially less than wonderful in your own eyes or own ears.
That's one of the clues to your lasting ability yourself. I mean, we've, throughout this series, obviously this is the 5th programme, several people in the BBC have said to me, I enjoyed that programme, and you realise that was their period. They didn't like anything before that period and didn't like anything after. But you've gone through and you're not quite like a weathercock, but you know what I mean, you're able to change.
Well, I think so, yes, but I can't... It always surprises me. It doesn't entirely surprise me. I mean, I can understand why people do stop at any particular time, I suppose, but I'm just glad that I don't really feel like that myself. I mean, I always relate these things to football because I find that football provides any number of useful analogies for life, but... I'm more concerned about what Liverpool do next Saturday than what they've done in the past. Their past history, although matchless, isn't of particular interest to me. So it's the same. It's the same with the music. And I always say that I'm more concerned about those records that I have in the back of the car that I shall listen to over the weekend than I am really, even in the ones that I've played in this week's programme.
Of course, there were in the punk period, the period that we looked at last week, people who impressed you then. And did keep going and kept impressing you. They weren't sort of punk, sort of frozen in time. And the Fall, we of course mentioned last week, have always been relevant to you. The group who weren't the Nightingales then, aren't the Nightingales now, but became, what were they first?
Well, they were the Prefects, because we went to see, I think it was the Clash who were playing at the Rainbow in London, and I had to leave before the Clash came on, so I never actually got to see either the Clash or the Sex Pistols live, but that didn't bother me a great deal anyway. But I did see the Nightingales, or the Prefects as they were then, and although Robert Lloyd now denies that the song was exactly as I remember it, so they did do a song called I've Got VD, which went along the lines of, they just came on and went, I've got VD! And then that was the end of the song, and I thought, that's just terrific. And so I was a fan from that moment. And if somebody had said to them, I mean, one felt anyway, that if somebody had said to them at that point, you go no further than this is your last performance, this is your first performance and your last, they wouldn't have actually been too concerned about that, in that every event was sufficient unto itself. And I quite like the idea of that, There's certainly no long-term career structure built into what they were doing.
But they had the ability to keep going, and Robert Lloyd still appears on the programme. But as the Nightingales. Let's listen to something from their earliest recordings. Urban Ospreys is the one you've picked.
Well, my buster got the guilty ego, the time limit. It's brought about by age-old lies, from a lie of pale blue skies. They must have got to find a face to wear, but the big dilemma's always there. Too wide up, too scared of sweat, the open pores that smell of death. Too paranoid have been taken for a ride. We have become mean, and I mean to decide before too long. But my ears hear the big dilemma series song. Between you and me, and I'm serious, there's an Osprey's nest in our back garden. I'm well blown by this fact, I'm worried stupid about the eggs. I think why our garden of all places, wonder sometimes if it's true. Urban Ospreys sound interesting, but how can I put it into use? Another will might lust for crumbs, but you spilled my pint, now buy me another. I have the pressure of day-to-day living. What on earth can I say to my lover? The two of us, we lust for crumbs of care, but the big dilemma's always there. Too far away to try and hear the open gob that spells a beer. But it all falls into place in the end, you know, this kind of stuff. So ponder what you've heard. The big dilemma's mighty words.
Urban Ospreys by the Nightingales. In this post-punk programme, let's start to get on to some of the bands that have sort of, marked this post-punk period, but started in that period. Here's somebody I certainly didn't get onto at the start. You did. Joy Division, that are still, in a sense, a lasting force. The Joy Division and New Order, of course. And I see we had a session in January 1979. The kids got onto it quite quickly. I remember walking by a big place like the Lyceum and saying, "Who's on tonight?" Crowds outside, and they said, "Joy Division." I thought, Joy Division? I know you'd gone on about it. What was it? Was it the sort of gloom that attracted you?
Well, they weren't, of course, initially all that gloomy. I mean, their early things, there are some tracks on the Factory Sampler and so forth, and they had tracks on a 10-inch LP on Virgin, which also featured The Fall and John Cooper Clarke and Buzzcocks, was it? I can't remember who else was on it, but anyway. But they weren't particularly gloomy, but they weren't... They weren't by any means punky. I mean, they'd moved away from that sort of thrashing.
Well, do you know what I mean by gloom? I mean, sort of, there is an aspect of teen life which is looking moodily into your bedroom mirror with one or two spots on and seeing yourself as gloomy, kind of, as a rebel without a cause, the James Dean thing. Isn't that almost something you've carried on into middle age in your own life? And I wonder if it touched a chord, as it did with the kids who went for Joy Division, touched a chord with you?
I suppose it might have done. I mean, it wasn't something that I was aware of particularly at the time. I do like those. I always think of them in a rather romantic way as being introspective and rather Russian, although, of course, I have no Russian ancestry at all that I'm aware of. But I quite like, I read somewhere that kind of introspection was classed as Russian. So it always makes me feel at least slightly Central European if I get into one of these, what most people would describe as feeling sorry for myself. But
did you get onto Joy Division because you thought, hello, there's a bit of a buzz, or did you hear something and think, I don't know who this lot are, but this goes for me? What did your ears say to Joy Division?
Well, initially they just said, here's another, because they were the first of the those sort of post-punk bands did seem to be coming out of Manchester, and so, which is something which, of course, I deeply resented, really, because although I was fiercely partisan in Liverpool's favour, really almost before the football thing. I mean, this was when I was like 6, 7 years old, something like that. So I resented the fact that the best and the most interesting bands seem to be coming out of Manchester. I'm afraid this is something which is still true, but I can't remember, to be honest with you, what my... I didn't at the time think that Joy Division were a band that I was going to prefer above any others. I mean, they were just one of a whole handful of bands whose work I was quite enjoying at that time.
watched it slip away.
24 Hours by Joy Division. They, strangely enough, they were not punky in the noise they made, as I remember it, but they became the sort of seminal band just after, first real seminal post-punk band. You know, they influenced so many other people.
Well, that's true, and it's obviously the death of Ian Curtis sort of mythologised them to a degree, which I think the surviving members of the band must have found very, very difficult to cope with. And I'm always rather glad that they've sort of gone on and, you know, as New Order, and have made something of that, because they could so easily, I think, have been sort of crushed by that whole attitude and approach. You know, it must have been a very melancholy thing to have to live with. But I still, not so much from Britain now, but I still get demo tapes from America and from the greater Europe of bands which are quite clearly influenced by nothing as much as they're influenced by Joy Division. And you get a bit fed up with it, really.
Well, although they were sort of key influence, I suppose, at that time, stylistically, and what was happening. You'd rather played down Liverpool, unusually for you, there, and saying, oh, well, it's a pity it wasn't. But there was a lot going off in Liverpool, and we used a lot. I was looking back here, people like Big in Japan, fairly forgotten bands, but I looked down the session sheet, there was, I was going to say, Frankie Holly, from Frankie Goes to Hollywood, or would be in Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Budgie, now Siouxsie. And so, you know, I mean, there were good names around that scene, and particularly, I noticed August 79, we started to play Echo and the Bunnymen.
Well, it was much more, it seemed to me, the Manchester thing seemed to be much more general, and it didn't seem to be quite so incestuous. Whereas the whole of all of those Liverpool bands seemed to spring from a sort of common source, really. I mean, there were only 8 or 10 people, and so you've got the Teardrop Explodes and Echo and the Bunnymen, and subsequently all the various manifestations of war that appeared. And
Big military, those people.
Yeah, but I mean, and all excellent in their way. But at the same time, it's you still don't feel that. I mean, what they were doing, you see, didn't. The influences were easier to see, I think. You know, the kind of Doors, predominantly a kind of Doors influence, I suppose. Jim Morrison influence was the strongest thing there. Nothing wrong with that at all. But with the Manchester bands, you felt that. I mean, you couldn't say who The Fall had been listening to or who Joy Division had been listening to. They just appeared to have arrived from nowhere, and that's something which has always appealed to me more. I mean, I like the Echo and the Bunnymen. I like the songs. You know, there were songs that I could remember, and in some cases sing along with.
Do you want to pick one now? But please don't sing along with me.
No, okay, I promise not to do that. Well, I always liked Villiers' Terrace.
I've been up to Villiers' Terrace to see what's happening. People rolling right on the carpet, mixing up the medicine. I've been up to Villiers' Terrace, I saw what's happening. People rolling right on the carpet, biting wool and pulling string. You said people roll on carpet, but I never thought they'd do those things. I've been up to Villiers' Terrace, I've been in it days for days. I drank some of the medicine, and I didn't like the taste. I've been up to Villiers' Terrace, I've been in it days for days. People rolling round on your carpet, biting wool and pulling string. You said people rolled on carpet, but I never thought they'd do those things. Been up to Villiers' Terrace to see what's happening. There's people rolling round on the carpet, passing round the medicine. Been up to Villiers' Terrace, I saw what's happening. People rolling round on my carpet, biting wool and pulling string. You said people roll on carpet, boys, but I never thought they'd do those things. Bouncy, what is taking money? Villiers' Terrace. Bouncy, what is taking money? Villiers' Terrace. Bouncy, what is taking money? Villiers' Terrace. Bouncy, what is taking money? Villiers' Terrace.
Villiers' Terrace, fortunately, just Echo and the Bunnymen, not JP singing along with it. But you were saying that you do like, I think you always have liked, the bands that were a surprise. They weren't yet another blues influence band, or whatever it was. You prefer them to say, oh, this has come out of nowhere almost. Surely the band in the post-punk period that, as much as anybody did that and became a great favourite with you, was the Cocktoes. who clearly were not a punk noise at all. They were a beautiful music noise in a sense.
Yes, well, no, I mean, not so much initially. I mean, when they first appeared, I got an acetate somewhere at home and an early demo tape, and everybody just said, oh, well, of course, this is another kind of Siouxsie and the Banshees, really. I must admit, I could... That always struck me as a bit of a nonsense, I must admit. I mean, just the fact that there were two women singers and with sort of fairly strong and identifiable voices didn't, I think, make the Cocteaus, Siouxsie and the Banshees clones by any means.
I'm not really aware of the sort of earliest stuff that you must have heard at the time. Was it not this kind of swirly-whirly kind of spacey stuff that we've got used?
Yeah, it was pretty swirly-whirly. It was. I mean, some of the early things sounded like they might have been produced by some kind of post-punk Phil Spector. You know, they were very kind of wall of soundish.
Yeah.
And
cathedral swooping.
Yeah, cathedral swooping was one. An excellent name for a band. We won on the streets next week.
Musette and drums from the Cocteau twins. Can you say then, apart from the cathedral swoopings, what was it then that because that did strike very much of a chord with you, didn't it?
Well, again, it was just because I preferred them then to now. I preferred them when Elizabeth was still singing identifiable words. And I suppose, once again, the big attraction was that it was such an extraordinary voice. I mean, people might have said that it was a very mannered voice, and if it was mannered, then I'm perfectly happy for it to have been so. I just liked the noise of her voice in the same way as I'd like the voice of Mark Bolan and Roger Chapman with Family and Captain Beefheart and all of those other people. It's just a strong and identifiable voice.
That's rather implying that, whereas obviously the punk thing, Anarchy in the UK, or if the kids are united, they will never be divided, there were usually clear messages, even though shouted at you, bellowed at you in that. Once she started, and Liz in the Cocteaus doing all that shally-wally, shilly-willy business, I mean, but you seem to just take that as well, the kind of the noise it made. You're listening to the noise rather than the message.
Yes, well, I don't think, one excludes the other. I mean, I think it's perfectly acceptable to be affected by both. I mean, another voice from the same era, actually slightly predating it, I'd have thought, although my sense of history is a bit uncertain.
Well, it doesn't matter for this programme, which is bringing it up to there. Go on, carry on.
Well, it would have been Altered Images, who again were accused of being Banshees clones, and I first heard them on a demo tape. Actually, I could take you to the spot on the road. It affected me that strongly that I can remember exactly where it was that I first heard them, and it was Dead Pop Stars came up on the demo tape I was listening to, and it was one of those things I was driving along at great risk to myself and at other motorists, like shoveling demo tape after demo tape into the car machine and then hurling them across the car, followed by strings of foul oaths. And it is actually a rather dangerous thing to do. But anyway, I was listening to this tape and was very much affected by it, and obviously got home and phoned you and said, we must book these people at earliest opportunity.
Yes, because they were sort of amateur, weren't they, at the time?
Well, I think they'd actually done support to the Banshees on a tour, and I think I did a gig with them at Leicester Polytechnic, which always used to be the best gig. It used to be the best gig in the world, Leicester Polytechnic, an unlikely location, but they were very, very good. And I must admit, I can say this now, and I was very smitten by Claire Grogan. It was the only time I ever felt infatuated by a pop star, which is quite nice, because I was already sort of like 40-something, so it's quite nice to experience what quite clearly are adolescent feelings at that age. And she is almost the only person, apart, of course, from my wife, who could have persuaded me to go into a recording studio and sing. And they came and collected me. Her and the drummer came and collected me after a programme. They hadn't warned me about it beforehand, which was probably a very good idea, because I should have found excuses not to go. And
you usually do.
Yes, I usually do. And they took me out to a recording studio. And on the way out there, I was horrified to find that the drummer and Claire put together weighed the same as me, which is a very, very depressing statistic. We got out there, and they wanted me to sing On Song Sung Blue, the Neil Diamond song. And there's actually some rather fine whistling in this as well, and it was my idea to do the whistling. I've always liked whistling.
Is it you whistling?
It's me whistling as
well.
well.
In that case, although this is a little self-indulgent, I'm sure the listeners will not forgive us if we go through the programme without you. Are you singing on this?
Singing, and I'm the sort of footballing chorus.
Okay, here we go.
Sun, blue, every garden grows wild.
Peel singing and whistling, probably for the only time in his life on one record, Song Sung Blue by Altered Images. Now, it seems to me that you've rather lost any sort of idea of what your ears are taking you to, except whatever we like kind of thing. It's very much not any more of a movement now. And the whole of the scene seemed to be a little bit like that. Do you think people were getting almost too diverse? This just, let's do this if it's funny.
I don't actually stop and think about these things in advance. You know, I don't pursue one particular movement. I mean, the punk thing, when it was happening, dominated all because there wasn't anything else that was interesting, or there wasn't anything else that interested me. But once the first sort of fine, careless rapture of that had diminished, then I returned to a kind of a differently informed but approach similar to the one that I'd had prior to punk, when I was just going around like looking for different areas of music and trying to find what I regarded as being the best in those different areas. I mean, previously it had been kind of American rock and folk and things like that, of course reggae, but there was just a wider area, more different places for me to go and potter about and look at what was going on. So, and in a way, I was happier at that time than during punk itself, when, as I say, I was beginning to feel as though I was being slightly compromised by the requirements and expectations of the people who listened to the programmes.
Yes, that sort of brings us on to something that I'm wondering how you feel now, where suddenly everybody's saying, world music. You can get a New Musical Express special on world music. Everybody's writing articles. World music, man. What they mean is really a lot of the stuff that you'd worked into the programme ever since I've known you over this 20 years. Bit of African music, a bit of all sorts of foreign musics, blues, country, everything sort of comes into it. Don't you feel a bit annoyed when suddenly people are saying, hey, look, Ma, no hands, and you think, I've been doing that for years?
Well, not really. I mean, it's a lot of it obviously does echo what you and I have already heard, but as Andy Kershaw always points out when we mention this to him, there's a whole new generation of people who actually didn't hear sort of Joni Mitchell much, and so are quite happy to listen to Michelle Shocked, and you know, you can find parallels throughout all of those things, and I'm not enormously keen on the bulk of it myself, but I mean, if other people are enjoying it, then good luck to them. I mean, people are always determined, and I can understand why, because it's a handy marketing thing and so forth, but I can never understand why people are so desperate to stamp some kind of group identity onto all of these things, because as far as I'm concerned, something like, if you like, the Butthole Surfers or something like that is as much world music as whatever people regard as being world music, like the Bundu Boys or something like this, or whatever it happens to be. I mean, it's all, it's either really good or bad or exciting or not exciting.
It's rather like when famous quote when somebody asked Louis Armstrong how he felt about folk music, and just said, well, I ain't never heard a horse sing. Something like that. I mean, it's all folk music. If folk sing it, I mean, it's a simple cracker barrel philosophy.
Well, it's one with which I entirely agree. I mean, I always used to, I've always argued that people like Robert Lloyd, we mentioned him earlier on, the Nightingales, now of Robert Lloyd and the New Four Seasons, but to me is a folk singer, in that, or
just because he's not
David
pretending to be a Thatcher or a blacksmith.
Right. Yeah, or David Gedge of the Wedding Present, or Morrissey even. I mean, they're singing songs of folk experience.
But we'll come on to Morrissey shortly. Before we leave that area, thinking of the world music approach, fine, Bundu Boys, we've played that a lot recently. You got onto them very quickly. But somebody who's not proved as popular, well, more a style that's not really proved popular, that was referred to in what programme too, I think, reggae. It's never quite made that breakthrough in sort of media popularity as you perhaps thought it would, but you've always just stuck with it. I mean, you've never sort of banned it. Misty's one of the post-punk bands that you featured probably most on the programme until quite recently. What made them stand out in reggae for you? You seem to think there was something special happens here.
The fact is that People Unite, which is Misty's label, put out the first single by the Ruts, of course, which obviously the Ruts are not a reggae band by any means. And then Misty released the LP, which I think, along with the Bundu Boys' Shabini, is probably my favourite LP of all time, which is that live LP recorded in Brussels at the Counter Eurovision Festival of, is it 1979? It doesn't sound like me to say it really, but I just found it a very spiritual record in some vague and ill-defined way, and still do, oddly enough. And when I get fed up with like listening to lots of new bands sounding like the Sisters of Mercy and so forth at home, then I quite often put on that LP, and I always insist that, in fact, when they did an arena programme about our radio programme, I think doing radio programmes about radio programmes is weird, but doing television programmes about radio programmes is weirder yet. But I insisted that they started with the introduction to the live LP in Brussels.
When we trod this land, we walk for one reason. The reason is to try to help another man to think for himself. The music of our art is roots music. Music which recalls history. Because without the knowledge of your history, you cannot determine your destiny. The music about the present, because if you're not conscious of the present, you're like a cabbage in this society. Music which tells about the future and the judgment which is to come. The music of our art is roots, presenting Misty in Roots.
Roots music for everybody. I like to say good evening or good morning. This one called Mankind, You a Sinner.
Stinky, sit down on ya.
Misty there, one of your favourites, of course, but we've got to face the fact that reggae was never quite as popular as it was with you, with many of your listeners. I suppose the same could be said for another rock deviation, hip-hop, which, although it's always seemed to me to be very varied and witty, some people thought it was very samey and very boring, and even wrote in to tell you, didn't they?
But not as much now. Whether they've just given up writing, given up listening, possibly, I don't know. But I get a lot of letters from people, genuinely get a lot of letters from people saying, well, I was one of the people who wrote into you a year and a half ago about hip-hop, saying don't play any more of it ever. And then I discovered that the last 5 records I bought were all hip-hop records. And how people can say it all sounds the same or it's all boring, I simply don't know, because, I mean, the structure of the conventional pop song does at least make that one performance but as a kind of, you know, pretty much the same all the way through. It's guitar, bass, drums, and somebody's singing. But with hip-hop, I mean, there are so many elements brought into play and brought in from such random points. I mean, like just sampled speech and sampled rhythms and sampled bits of guitar. And so, well, I mean, there's just so much going on. There's almost... In fact, there's almost too much happening in a lot of the records where you have to listen to them quite carefully, quite a lot, in order to be able to identify everything that's going on.
You see?
3.
You see?
2.
You see?
1.
You see?
Now we come to the payoff.
Punk, rock, new wave of soul, pop music, salsa, rock and roll, calypso, reggae, rhythm and blues, master mix those #1 hits. Play that favorite song of mine and accept my calls on the request line. DJ will play just for you, but I gotta get down and show I know how to. round. That beat, why don't you play for me? Switch the mix, Mr. DJ. Play that beat, why don't you play for me? Switch the mix, Mr. DJ. Play that beat, play that beat, play that beat. Why don't you play for me? It's the joint. Move it, move it. Move it, rap on it. You can play it and 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 play it all night long, and I'll listen to it over and over again and again and again and again while you play my song, yes. And I'll keep on dancing and keep on dancing, having fun until the morning sun. Play for me, just play for me. Oh, he's the king of every beat, the one-man band, 7 days a week, passing the pain, a radio celebrity of every disco, the one with the gifted fingertips. Music is his bag of tricks. Go ahead, Mr. Disc Jockey, play that beat. Play Check this out. Play for the punk rock. Play for the hip hop. Play it on the radio. Sure, do you love the Supreme Team show? Play for the globe. C-L-O-P-E. Play it in the playground. Play it on the street. Play for Wizkid. Just play that beat. I tumble. That's the mix, those number 1 tune. Whack, whack. Wop, babaloo, bop-a-lop, bamboo. Wop, babaloo, bop-a-lop, bamboo. Wop, babaloo, bop-a-lop, bamboo.
Heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe. Hop forward, hop back, hop, hop, hop.
Played it for her, play it for me. Played it for her, play it for me. Play it. Play it. Play it. Play it. Play it. Play it.
Play it, kick it.
Double D and Steinsky there, showing that there is life after the old guitar bass drums. But let's just get, that's not finished, of course. What we call mainstream rock, you know, right back to your earliest choices of rock and roll through the Beatles and everything else, right up to the present day. The basic guitar, bass, drums noise does persist, mainstream rock. But out of the sort of liberation that punk brought to the model that area was getting into, I should imagine the most successful band that you've had on the programme recently must surely be the Smiths, who clearly don't have a punky noise of a 1, 2, 3, I've got VD style. Totally different, but couldn't have existed probably without punk. And you had them on very early, on May 1983, before they had a record out, after I think they first came from Manchester and appeared in London. Again, looking back to that, the Manchester gloom, it must be the weather in Manchester. There's always been that melancholy solitude feel, of a whimsical and rather ironic and witty approach to solitude in Morrissey's stuff. Is again, would you say, well, Morrissey, I suppose he's my sort of chap?
Well, I would like to, I would like to think he was. Yes, obviously we're not. I've only met him a couple of times, and I think you actually deserve some credit because it was you that went out and heard the Smiths, and it's one of the very few times that you come back very enthusiastic about a band and said we really must get these people in at the earliest opportunity. So I always try and give you credit for that. And people, that's the kind of open-hearted, open-minded kind of chap I am.
But still, get on. What about you? What did you make of them?
Well, I just like the fact that. I like the fact that I was hearing words being used in popular songs that I wasn't used to hearing. Just the use of language really pleased me as much as anything else. And his voice, again, was not a voice that you could immediately trace back to somebody else. I mean, he wasn't trying to be Mark Bolan, or he wasn't trying to be Jim Morrison again. And they were, as Manchester bands, and as so many of these bands do seem to be from Manchester, and just another band that arrived from nowhere with a very clear and strong identity, you know, and that is always attractive.
It's time the tale were told of how took a child and you made him old. It's time the tale were told of how you took a child and you made him old. You made him old. Wheel around the fountain, slap me on the patio, I'll take it now. 15 minutes with you, well, I wouldn't say no. Oh, people said that you were virtually dead, and they were so wrong. 15 minutes with you, oh, I wouldn't say no. Oh, people said that you were easily led, and they were half right. Oh, they were half right. It's time the tale were told of how you took a child and you made him old. It's time that the tale were told of how you took a child and you made him old. You made him old. Oh, rid around the fountain, slap me on the patio, I'll take it now. 15 minutes with you, oh, I wouldn't say no. Oh, people see no worth in you, oh, but I do. 15 minutes with you, oh, I wouldn't say no. Oh, people see no worth in you, I do.
Reel Around the Fountain by the Smiths. Very kind of you to give me some credit for seeing it. It was just I was free to go, and it was quite obvious that they were going to come to something, and there would have been enough buzz for you to say, I think we better get those in, as often happened. But something that you did come onto very much on your own, I think, and in fact more or less gave the name to, which you now see quoted all over the place. I'm not quite sure always, you'll have to put me right now on this, what actually it applies to. People often say, oh, of course, the shambling bands. It was you that first said of a certain type of band, the shambling bands, I think. And then it started to appear as a critical, rather like, the word impressionism. Right. So it definitely meant something. And it often seemed to be those sort of bands, often from some Midland or Northern label. Either they were all little short S words like Shrub, Stump, Slab, Snot, those sort of bands, or Big Flame, Bogshed, particularly. Have I got it right? Are they all sort of part of the shambling thing? And what did you hear in it? And is it just the slightly antisocial noise they make that attracts you?
Well, no, it wasn't that at all. It was... in fact, I've on several occasions apologised to the members of Bogshed, both publicly and privately, for lumbering them with this shambling business, because they were the band that I was speaking of when I first used the expression on the radio. And what I was trying to imply was, and I certainly didn't see it as a kind of generic thing, really, but a band, again, whose preoccupations were not necessarily with either developing extraordinary instrumental skills or with becoming international celebrities. And it was just approach.
It's not like a public school thing, it was an attitude that they got right.
Yes, it was just their approach to it and the sound that they made, which sounded sort of attractively disorganised.
Bogshed shambling their way through tried and tested public speaker. Obviously, we've been looking at not only the post-punk period, but we've been looking at now. Before we finish, it's been quite a wide area that we've had to look at recently because there's been so many different styles, political rock, electro rock, all sorts of different things that have come up in the last 10 years, the post-punk years. But can you think of one record? We've finished all the programmes with you picking one record to play in full. One record that you would say it sort of, well, says yes to life after punk. You know, punk wasn't the end. Yes, it's still going on. Something's happening and it stands up on its own as a post-punk record that we can now hear and say, yes, Peel's picked this one.
Well, I think, oddly enough, I know what you mean, but I think that some of the records that I've liked best over the last 10 years have been those records which have said no to life. And I think I'd pick one of those, really, because I went to see the Butthole Surfers play in Hammersmith a few weeks ago, and it was the week after Big Black had played, and everybody who saw Big Black said they were absolutely apocalyptic, but I missed them, and they've now broken up, and that's something I shall regret, genuinely regret, like not having seen the Smiths play live. I shall regret forever, I think. But I saw the Butthole Surfers and came away, genuinely, say with one's senses reeling, does sound like a cliche from a regional newspaper, but that's exactly how I felt after I'd seen them. I mean, all of my preconceptions about what things should be, and for example, one obvious thing was like the sexism, for example, because they had a completely naked woman dancing on stage with them throughout the entire thing. You know, is that titillation? What attitude should I have had to that? And that was just one aspect of what they were doing. So I think the Butthole Surfers would define something for me, although I'm not quite sure what it is. I mean, I don't feel that one should necessarily always enjoy popular music. You know, this is one of the things which, one of the conflicts that I've had with people over the years. I mean, you don't...
Not mainstream Radio 1, really. They come, yeah, where's the fun in it?
That's right. I mean, but not every play has a happy ending, or every film that you go and see has a happy ending. Not every painting that you see is necessarily going to be of kittens sitting in baskets.
Well, in that case, let's make sure that this programme doesn't have a totally happy ending. We will finish with the Butthole Surfers. 22 going on 23.
Yes. I enjoy your show and I've been trying to get through for quite a while.
Well, we're glad you kept trying.
Thank you. I have this problem. Last July, I was assaulted sexually, and ever since then, I cannot sleep. I've been having trouble sleeping.
How old are you?
I'm 22, going on 23. The dreams, like I come out a winner, but every time I try to do that, I just can't get anywhere. It seems that I keep having the same dream over and over again, and I had one of those tonight, and this is why I'm up so late. To walk in the house, I'm paranoid. I just jump up and turn off the TV because he says, is that all you have to do all day? Just sit around and watch TV? And I love to travel, so I've mentioned traveling to him, and finances are no problem. And he said he did all the traveling that he wanted to do while he was in the service.
Well, that was the Butthole Surfers, and next week we end the series by sitting back and taking stock, a sort of John Peel overview, I suppose, called Past, Present and Future, which was the title of a great song by the Shangri-Las, and actually sounded nothing like this.
Part 5 of Peeling Back the Years, John Peel talking to John Walters.